What would you do if, right now, the person behind you made a mistake you couldn't take back? Not a big mistake, not a crime, just a tiny decision, a nervous laugh, a reach for the glove box, a sentence that came out wrong. And in less than 60 seconds, that one small mistake rewrites the next 6 months of your life. That's what a traffic stop really is. Not a ticket, not a warning. It's a pressure test. And most people fail it before they even know they're being tested. Here's a question I want you to sit with before we go any further. When you see those red and blue lights in your rearview mirror, what's the very first thought that goes through your head? Stop right now and answer that honestly. Comment it. Because I promise you, whatever you just thought, there's a good chance it's already putting you at a disadvantage. And most drivers don't realize that until they're standing on the side of the road, watching their rights disappear one question at a time. Most people believe a traffic stop is about the traffic violation, that if you just explain yourself clearly, be polite and cooperate, everything will be fine. But that's not what's actually happening. What's actually happening is something far more subtle and far more dangerous to your future. See, the traffic violation is just the excuse. The real purpose of the stop is information gathering, and the officer already has a massive psychological advantage before you say a single word. Let me show you what I mean. Researchers who study police encounters have found that within the first 3 seconds of a traffic stop, the officer has already made a preliminary risk assessment based on nothing more than your behavior during the pullover. How fast you stopped, where you stopped, whether your hand stayed on the wheel or disappeared, whether you turned to look. These aren't judgments about your driving, they're judgments about your threat level. And here's what most people miss. The officer is not trying to figure out if you committed the violation. They already saw that. They're trying to figure out if you're lying about something else. That's the open secret of traffic enforcement no one tells you. Most traffic stops are not about traffic. They are about what law enforcement calls pretext. Pretext means the legal violation gives them the right to stop you, but the real goal is to investigate something else. Something bigger. Drugs. Warrants. Evidence of other crimes. And before you say, I don't have anything to hide, stay with me, because that mindset is exactly what gets people into trouble. A few years ago, a young woman named Sarah was driving home from work on a Friday evening. She was pulled over for going 5 miles over the speed limit. 5 miles. She was polite. She was respectful. When the officer asked if he could search her car, she said yes because she had nothing to hide. And she didn't. But in the back seat, under a pile of laundry, was a small prescription bottle from her roommate that had fallen out of a gym bag. The name on the bottle didn't match her ID. She didn't know it was there. She didn't even know her roommate had ever lost it. That one innocent yes turned into possession charges, 6 court appearances, $7,200 in legal fees, and a criminal record that showed up on every job application for 4 years. She didn't do anything wrong. She just didn't know what the officer was really asking. This is the part of the video where I need you to really pay attention, because what comes next is the difference between being a cooperative citizen and accidentally destroying your own life. And most lawyers won't tell you this because they make their money cleaning up the mess after you make the mistake. But I'm going to tell you right now, for free, because you deserve to know it before those lights appear in your mirror. The single biggest mistake drivers make during traffic stops is talking too much. That's it. Not lying, not being rude, talking. Police officers are trained in what's called cognitive interviewing. That's a fancy way of saying they're trained to get you to talk until you contradict yourself or admit to something you didn't mean to admit to. Every question they ask has a purpose beyond the obvious one. When they say, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" they're not asking for information. They already know why. They're asking to see if you'll admit guilt immediately. When they say, "Where are you coming from?" they're not making conversation. They're building a timeline they can check for inconsistencies. When they say, "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" they're not waiting for a yes or no. They're listening to how you say the word no, the hesitation, the pitch change, the extra words you add to fill the silence. Those are cues, and they're incredibly hard to fake, because most people don't even know they're giving them. Here's what actually works, and I'm going to give it to you step by step, so listen closely. When you see the lights, signal and pull over to the right as safely and quickly as you can. Stop the car, turn on your interior light if it's dark, roll down your window all the way. Keep your hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Do not reach for anything, not your license, not your registration, not your phone, nothing. Wait for the officer to approach. When they ask for your license and registration, tell them where each item is before you move. Say, "My license is in my right back pocket, my registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for them now." Then move slowly. That simple sentence changes everything because it removes the officer's primary fear, the fear that you're reaching for a weapon. Then when the officer feels safe, the entire dynamic of the stop changes. But here's where most people get lost. After you hand over your documents, the officer will almost certainly ask you questions. And this is the moment that separates the drivers who get warnings from the drivers who get handcuffs. You must be polite, you must be cooperative, and you must say these exact words. "Officer, I'm happy to cooperate with you. I'm just not going to answer any questions." Say it calmly, say it respectfully. Then stop talking. Do not explain why. Do not say, "I know my rights." Do not say, "Am I free to go?" Just those words, and then silence. What you're doing is exercising your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't escalate the situation. And here's the psychological trick the officers won't tell you about. When you say that, politely and calmly, most officers will actually respect it more than if you had answered their questions, because the drivers who know their rights and exercise them without being confrontational are not the drivers officers worry about. The drivers they worry about are the ones who won't shut up. Let me give you a real example. There's a video from a body camera that law enforcement training academies actually use now to teach new officers. A man gets pulled over for a broken taillight. The officer asks if he knows why he was stopped. The man says, "No, sir, I don't, but I'm happy to take care of whatever the issue is." The officer asks where he's coming from. The man pauses and says, "Officer, respectfully, I'm not going to answer questions about where I've been." The officer asks if he has anything illegal in the car. The man says, "I don't consent to any searches, officer, but I will comply with any lawful orders you give me." The entire stop lasts 7 minutes. The officer gives him a written warning for the taillight and lets him go. No search, no questions answered, no escalation. That driver knew exactly what he was doing, and because he was calm and respectful, the officer had no reason to push further. Now contrast that with a different stop. Same broken taillight, different driver. The officer asks, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And the driver says, "I was barely speeding. Come on, my taillight works fine. I just fixed it last week." Immediately, the officer has 3 statements to check: speed, taillight, repair date. If any of those are wrong, even accidentally, the driver is now not just someone with a broken taillight, he's someone who might be lying. And once an officer believes you might be lying, the stop expands, the questions get harder, the requests turn into demands, and the driver who started out trying to be helpful ends up giving consent to a search he never should have agreed to because he's desperate to prove he's telling the truth. This is the part where I need you to understand something uncomfortable. You do not have to consent to a search, ever. Even if you have nothing to hide. Even if you think saying yes will make you look more cooperative. The Supreme Court has ruled repeatedly that police cannot search your car without either a warrant, probable cause, or your consent. And probable cause is a much higher bar than most people think. Seeing a broken taillight is not probable cause to search your trunk. Smelling marijuana might be, but marijuana odor alone has become legally complicated in many states. Having a nervous demeanor is absolutely not probable cause. But here's what most people don't know. If you say yes to a search, you have just handed the officer the only thing they needed. And once you give consent, you cannot take it back. Even if they find something that isn't yours. Even if they plant something, which is rare but does happen. Even if they misinterpret something innocent as evidence. Your yes is their green light, and the law will hold you to it. So what do you say when an officer asks, "Do you mind if I take a quick look in your car?" You say this, calmly and politely, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." That's it. You don't need to give a reason. You don't need to say, "Because I know my rights," or "Because you don't have probable cause." Just the statement. And then stop talking. If the officer searches anyway, you do not physically resist. Resisting is a crime even if the search is illegal. But by stating clearly that you do not consent, you preserve your right to challenge the search later in court. And here's the reality most drivers never learn until it's too late. The vast majority of searches that happen during traffic stops are consent searches. Officers ask because they don't have probable cause, and when you say no, calmly and respectfully, most officers will simply move on. They have other stops to make. They're not going to risk their career on an illegal search of a car belonging to someone who clearly knows their rights. I want you to think about the psychology of power for a second. On a traffic stop, the officer has nearly all the visible power. The uniform, the gun, the lights, the authority to give you a ticket that raises your insurance rates for 3 years. But you have something too. You have the power of silence, the power of consent, the power of not helping them build a case against yourself. And the moment you realize that, the entire dynamic shifts. You're no longer a nervous driver hoping to talk their way out of a ticket. You're a citizen who understands the rules of the game. And that confidence changes everything about how you're perceived. Let me share one more story. A man named Marcus was driving home from a friend's house around 11 o'clock at night. He was pulled over for rolling through a stop sign. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize excessively. He just said, "I understand, officer." When the officer asked if he'd been drinking, Marcus said, "I'm not going to answer that, officer. I don't mean any disrespect." The officer then asked him to step out of the car. This is legal. An officer can order you out of the vehicle during a traffic stop. It's been settled law for decades. Marcus stepped out. The officer asked if he could search the car. Marcus said, "I don't consent to any searches." The officer said, "I'm going to call a K9 unit." Marcus said, "That's your right, officer." 40 minutes later, the dog arrived. It sniffed around the car. It didn't alert. The officer handed Marcus a warning for the stop sign and said, "Have a good night." Marcus didn't win because he was innocent. He won because he refused to participate in his own investigation. He stayed calm, he stayed respectful, and he stayed quiet. Now here's the question that keeps most people up at night. What if you actually did something wrong? What if you had 2 glasses of wine with dinner and you're not sure if you're over the limit? What if you have a joint in the center console from a concert last week that you forgot about? What if you're driving on a suspended license and you didn't even know it? Here's the truth. The same rules apply even more. Do not answer questions. Do not consent to searches. Do not perform field sobriety tests voluntarily. Field sobriety tests are designed to be failed. They are not pass or fail exams. They are evidence-gathering exercises. Even a sober person can fail a field sobriety test if they're nervous, tired, have a medical condition, or are wearing uncomfortable shoes. And here's what almost no one knows. You are not legally required to perform field sobriety tests in most states. They are voluntary. The officer will not tell you this. They will make it sound like an order. But unless you are under arrest, you can politely decline. Say, "Officer, I'm not comfortable performing those tests. I understand you're doing your job, and I'm happy to sit here while you do what you need to do." The only chemical test you cannot refuse in most states is the breathalyzer or blood test after an arrest for suspected DUI. But before arrest, everything else is voluntary. And most people don't know that until they've already performed the walk and turn, the one-leg stand, and the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, all of which are now on video and will be used against them in court. Stay with me, because this next part matters more than anything I've said so far. The goal of a traffic stop is not to prove your innocence, it's to avoid proving your guilt. There's a massive difference. Most drivers approach a stop like a conversation where the truth will set them free. But it's not a conversation. It's an interview where you are the suspect, even if you've done nothing wrong. Everything you say can and will be used against you. That's not a warning from a TV show. That's the actual Miranda warning, which only applies after you're in custody. Before that, everything you say is evidence. Your nervous laugh, your over-explanation, your attempt to bond with the officer by talking about your own cousin who's a cop. All of it goes into the report. Here's what the smart drivers do. They separate compliance from conversation. Compliance means following lawful orders. If the officer tells you to get out of the car, you get out. If they tell you to put your hands behind your back, you do it. If they tell you to sit on the curb, you sit. Those are lawful orders. You comply. But conversation is different. Conversation is answering questions. Conversation is explaining. Conversation is defending yourself. And you do not have to engage in conversation. You can be completely compliant and completely silent at the same time. That is your right. Let me give you the exact script that lawyers give their own families. It works in all 50 states. Pull over safely, hands on the wheel, interior light on. When the officer approaches, say, "Good evening, officer. Here's my license and registration. I'm going to keep my hands on the wheel unless you need me to reach for something else." Hand over the documents. Then when the questions start, say, "Officer, I don't mean to be difficult, but I'm not going to answer any questions. I'm happy to sit here while you do what you need to do." If they ask why, say, "I'm just choosing to remain silent." If they persist, say, "I've said everything I'm going to say, officer. I'm happy to comply with any lawful orders you give me." Then stop. Do not answer the next question. Do not explain further. Do not fill the silence. Silence is your shield. And the more comfortable you get with it, the safer you become. Now I want to address the fear that's probably running through your head right now. What if the officer gets angry? What if they take it personally? What if they write me a ticket out of spite? Here's the hard truth. An officer who is going to write you a ticket has already decided before they walked up to your window. Nothing you say will change that. But plenty of things you say will turn a warning into a ticket, or a ticket into an arrest. The decision to give you a break usually happens in the first 30 seconds of the stop. It's based on your demeanor, your compliance, and your perceived respect for the officer. It is almost never based on your excuse for why you were speeding or why your registration is expired. Officers have heard every excuse 1,000 times. They don't believe any of them. What they do believe is the driver who is calm, respectful, and doesn't waste their time with stories. That driver might get the warning. The driver who talks too much, who argues, who says, "I know my rights," like a weapon, that driver is getting every single charge the officer can find. Here's a psychological pattern that research has confirmed over and over. People who are guilty tend to talk more. They over-explain. They offer alibis before they're asked. They try to fill every silence with words that prove they're a good person. Officers know this, and when you sit quietly, hands on the wheel, answering only the minimum required questions, you look like someone who has nothing to prove. That's power. That's the power most drivers give away for free because they're nervous and they want to be liked. Stop wanting to be liked. Want to be left alone. Before we finish, I want to give you 3 specific things you should never say during a traffic stop. Memorize these. Number 1, "I only had a couple." Never quantify your alcohol consumption. It's an admission. Number 2, "You can check, I don't have anything." That's consent. Even if you say it casually, even if you're just trying to be helpful, those words have been used in court to justify searches. Number 3, "I'm in a hurry." This signals to the officer that you might be trying to get away from something. It changes their risk assessment. You are never in a hurry during a traffic stop. You have all the time in the world. And here's one bonus thing you should never do. Never, under any circumstances, record the officer on your phone while holding it in their face. This is not because it's illegal. In most places, it's perfectly legal to record police in public. But it is psychologically stupid. It immediately puts the officer on the defensive. It makes you look combative. And it guarantees that any discretion they might have shown you disappears. If you want to record, mount your phone on your dashboard or set it in your cup holder facing out. Let it record silently without you touching it. That way you have evidence if something goes wrong, but you haven't provoked the officer into making something go wrong. I want to leave you with something most YouTube videos won't tell you because it's not dramatic enough. The vast majority of traffic stops end with nothing more than a warning or a ticket. Most officers are not looking to ruin your life. They're doing a job that is genuinely dangerous. People attack police during traffic stops more often than you think. And your goal should not be to win some imaginary legal battle on the side of the road. Your goal should be to get home safely with as little damage to your wallet and your record as possible. That's it. You don't need to prove you're right. You don't need to teach the officer a lesson. You need to say very little, sign the ticket if you get one, and fight it in court later if you want to. The side of the road is the worst place in the world to make your argument. Emotions are high. There's no judge. There's no evidence. There's just you, a uniform, and a badge. That's a fight you lose every time. Here's what I want you to take with you. Knowledge is not the same as power. Applied knowledge is power. You now know more about traffic stops than 99% of drivers. You know about pretext stops. You know about consent searches. You know about the psychology of silence. But none of that matters if you freeze when the lights come on. So here's your homework. Practice the script. Say it out loud in your car. Officer, I'm not going to answer any questions. I'm happy to comply with any lawful orders you give me. Say it until it feels natural. Say it until it's not a confrontation, but just a fact. Because the day those lights appear in your mirror is not the day to learn this for the first time. That's the day to use what you already know. So here's my final question for you, and I really want you to answer it in the comments. After watching this, what's one thing you've done during past traffic stops that you now realize was a mistake? Don't be embarrassed. We've all done it. The goal isn't to be perfect yesterday. The goal is to be better tomorrow. Drop your answer in the comments, and let's learn from each other. And if you got value from this, there's something I want you to do before you click off. Take 30 seconds right now and share this video with one person you care about. Send it to your teenager. Send it to your partner. Send it to your friend who drives for a living. Because the truth about traffic stops is something most drivers only learn after it's too late. But you're not most drivers anymore. You're the one who knew better. Drive safe. Stay smart. And when those lights show up, remember everything you just heard. Then take a breath, put your hands on the wheel, and say nothing.